Well, good evening. I'm so glad to be here. And wow, I think Republicans in South Dallas, that's sort of like an endangered species, isn't it? My goodness. I know a lot of your representatives because I work on behalf of taxpayers in the legislature a lot. Of course, I'm a volunteer, all grassroots. We predate the Tea Party by about 4 years. But we've worked in the legislative session for 4 sessions on transportation issues. And I'll tell you, the way I got involved, because a lot of people wonder, how is this homeschool mom of now 9 children, this is my 9th little baby here, how on earth does she have time to do all this? Well, the truth is, I don't have any more time than you have, right? I mean, we all have the same amount of time, and my plate's very, very full. But when you see, after I share some information with you tonight, you're going to see how much is really at stake with our freedom to travel with these toll roads and transportation policy in our state. And really, it is a really, really big, corrupt money scheme. So it involves just massive amounts of public money. So that alone should concern all of us as taxpayers, where that taxpayer money is going and how it's being spent. They came in, TxDOT, and we hadn't even lived here a year yet, because we come from California. I have to whisper that in Texas, you know, because everyone thinks I'm liberal if I came from California. But we left California for obvious reasons and came as fast as we could to Texas, right, for obvious reasons. But we had a TxDOT meeting around the corner from our house. And we found out that they were going to come and we're just north of San Antonio in the Texas Hill Country. And they were going to come in and toll every lane I drive on today on Highway 281. And you know, 281 comes all the way through the state. You know, it comes from the border all the way up to Canada, really. And they wanted to come in and toll every single main lane that I drive on today and make me pay to come into San Antonio every time we have to come into San Antonio. And leave us frontage roads as our non-toll option. So we're like, oh no. We're not going to let them do this. And so 2 lawsuits later, we've been delaying it now for almost 10 years. But they're still trying to come back at us and still toll parts of the road. So it's really tough to defeat, but you'll find out why here in a few minutes. But that's kind of what got me involved in all this. And of course, shortly after that public hearing, we found out these foreign companies were putting an unsolicited bid on the project and wanted to take over not only 281, but all of 1604, which is a huge loop around San Antonio. And then within a week of that, we found out about the Trans-Texas Corridor, Trans-Texas Corridor 35 project in particular, because that's kind of on the eastern edge of Bexar County. And so that really got people stirred up, as you know. So we were kind of on the front lines of all that. And with Zachary Construction being headquartered in San Antonio, we kind of feel like we're ground zero of this big mess around our state. But let me just explain a little bit of background of how we got where we are today. First of all, our legislators have been on a spending spree. And maybe some of you have heard that from people like Joanna Fleming of Grassroots America and some other groups that have gone around and talked about the problems with our budget. But at the end of the day, one of the things that most people don't realize is how our roads are funded. I think we know it's gas tax. But where's that gas tax going? And what's been happening with that? Well, that's a fixed amount. It's 20 cents a gallon is what we pay in state gas tax. And on the federal level, it's 18.4 cents. So total, it's 38.4 cents. Both the state gas tax and the federal gas tax is a fixed amount. It does not go up with inflation, which a lot of people don't realize, I think. So we're basically trying to build roads, today's roads, with a 20-year-old revenue stream. Unlike our property taxes that they love to ratchet up every year, right, with valuations of our homes and such, with all kinds of monkey business, that doesn't happen with our road dollars. And then on top of that, if you see number 2 there, 47% of that gas tax money, which has been basically diminishing, or at least the buying power has, because inflation's been eating into it, not to mention things like fuel efficiency and all that, 47% of it is being diverted for non-road purposes. How many of you are aware that a quarter of every dollar we collect in transportation gas tax money is going to public schools? 25%. You are aware, but most people don't realize. This was done decades ago by constitutional amendment. We already know from what Eugene was sharing that these constitutional amendment elections are very low turnout. A lot of bad stuff gets passed because we're not paying attention, and I think people just get overwhelmed by the number of initiatives on there, and they feel like they don't have the time or don't know where to reach out to get educated on it, so they just don't vote. because they'd rather not vote than vote for something that they think might come back and haunt them. So it's, that's how we got this diversion of the gas tax money, 25% of it. Well then, how do we get to the 47%? And that was so 25% by constitutional mandate has to go to public schools, and that's about $750 million a year is going to public schools from our gas tax. So we can't do much about that unless we change the Constitution. But the other percentage on top of that, we can do something about. Now, a nickel goes to DPS for policing the highways. But then, there's even more than that that gets diverted for things like tourism promotion, enhancing the employee benefits in the Attorney General's office, things like new computers in the Comptroller's office, things like the State Office of Administrative Hearings, you know, it just goes on and on, diversions. The other thing most people don't seem to be aware of is Texas now, because all we hear is the good, rosy news about how wonderful Texas is doing economically, right? And compared to other states, by and large, we are doing better. But being better than the worst isn't necessarily being very good, right? Excuse me, I'm sorry to try to clear my throat here so I don't mess up the video. But we lead the country now in road debt. Before Governor Perry took office, we had zero debt for roads. Zero. But on Republicans' watch, we are now the deepest in debt of any other state in the country. $31 billion when you count principal and interest. That's not something to brag about. Also, our total state spending as a percent of population has tripled in the last 20 years. If you look at just this last one here, if you look at just last biennium to this biennium, our spending went up 26% biennium over biennium. The legislature, thank you, came into session with an $8 billion surplus. Squandered all of it and didn't fund roads and water out of our base budget. So what we have, folks, is a spending problem, not a revenue problem, which is what they'll tell you all the time, is that we don't have the revenue to build roads. In other words, they want to raise your taxes to get them out of the road funding shortfall. Now, toll roads today are not like the traditional turnpikes that you've had in the past in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, like the Dallas-Norman Tollway. We would call that a traditional turnpike. And that is one where it's a brand new road. It doesn't mess with our existing roads. There's no taxpayer money involved at all. And we feel like a well-conceived toll road would take the toll off the road when it's paid for, right? When the debt service is retired. But now, they're actually tolling existing roads. Whether they're taking existing free lanes or if they're adding toll lanes down the middle of an existing road where there aren't currently lanes. Either way, they're adding tolls to our existing roads. And they're using a lot of public money. And that's different than the user fee model that we've always had up until now. Now, how many of you have heard this term, public-private partnerships? Okay, a couple of you, very good, all right. So then you're probably aware that these are basically the marriage of the corporation with the state. And that's what makes them so dangerous. At the end of the day, some people will call them corporatism, cronyism, fascism even. But they basically are granting private entities monopolies, in this case over our public infrastructure. And these P3s, that's what we call them for short, are absolutely part and parcel of Agenda 21. Now, you all familiar with Agenda 21? I think Eugene's got you all educated on that, right? One of the stated goals, if you look in the transportation plank of Agenda 21, I've read through a lot of it. Two of their stated goals are to abolish private property and to restrict mobility. And that's precisely what these public-private partnerships are designed to do. They're also sweetheart deals. Now, we've always had eminent domain for roads, right? We all understand that there is sometimes it's necessary to take someone's property for the greater good, for public use, for a road. However, when they're handing that road over to a private company, for-profit company, especially when they're 50-year deals, in Texas they're 50 years, but the 100-year deal that Eugene's talking about happened in Chicago. And there's a 75-year lease that happened on the Indiana Toll Road. But Texas, we've capped them at 52 years max, which is still ridiculous. It's multi-generational and it's, way too long. But now we're talking about eminent domain for private gain. It's like the Kelo case. If you remember that the Supreme Court case of Suzette Kelo versus New London, Connecticut, where they basically came in and took this woman's private property. Well, there was this whole row of homes, but she's the one that sued. Took her private property so that Pfizer, a pharmaceutical company, could come in, and the city wanted it because they could get a higher property tax basically from a commercial building than they could from their residents. So it's basically what they're doing for private gain. Public-private partnerships essentially do the same thing. Also, there's these wonderful little devil in the details, as they say, in these contracts called non-compete agreements. Now, some of you may have heard of those in the corporate world, where if an executive leaves a company, they're bound by a non-compete that they can't go work for an immediate competitor for a certain period of time. Well, they have these things for these road deals, too. And not just on the public-private partnerships, they're now putting non-competes even in publicly run toll projects, like an NTTA project. What it does is it limits or prohibits, sometimes it outright prohibits, the expansion of our free roads that surround the toll roads. So it forces you to have to take the toll road eventually because they're going to lock down your free routes and not allow them to be expanded for the life of this contract, which in this case is what, 50 years? And we came in 2007 and put a cap on it. We still couldn't get rid of the non-competes completely because, of course, you know how our politicians are. But we got it capped at 30 years. But still, 30 years of no free road expansion. So when the LBJ opens up, the way that contract is written, I believe, is the way the non-compete reads, is you can at least build the expansion, but we will have to pay Cintra for any loss in toll revenue for having built another facility or expanded another free road. So basically we're having future public transportation needs being determined by the private profits of a foreign company, which is just outrageous. I mean, all of us Texans are like, whoa, that doesn't sit well with us, right? Well, there's also something in one of the first P3s that was signed in Texas. This was the State Highway 130. How many of you have heard about that failing toll road down there outside Austin? It's a loop around Austin. It goes basically from Georgetown around down to I-10 and Seguin near San Antonio, but it's supposed to be a bypass for I-35 congestion through Austin. Well, that was the first foreign-owned toll road to open in Texas about a year ago. In fact, a year ago, Veterans Day, so literally a year ago yesterday. And in that contract, there's something in the appendix that incentivized the State Highway Department to increase the speed limit on the tollway. And they got a certain concession payment, I call it a bribe, but they got paid by the private foreign company for every increment of 5 miles per hour over the regular speed limit that they set the speed limit on the tollway. So they maxed it out all the way to 85 miles per hour, and that's how a lot of people heard about this road because that is the highest speed limit in the country. There's no road in the U.S. that has a higher speed limit than State Highway 130, this foreign toll road. In the same commission hearing that TxDOT raised the speed limit on State Highway 130, they subsequently lowered the speed limit on the surrounding free road, Highway 183 through Lockhart, was 65 miles per hour. They lowered it to 55 miles per hour. And you tell me that that's not a manipulation of our speed limits to enhance the private profits and to make that private tollway look more attractive than the free road alternative. So that's the kind of nonsense that goes on with these contracts. Then, particularly in the urban areas, now the toll rate on the SH-130, because it's more far-flung, it's way further out, you've got to go 35 miles out of your way roughly to take this road as an alternative, and it's a greenfield project, their toll rates are closer to 15 cents a mile, which is still, if you take it all the way from I-10 Seguin to Georgetown, it's $12 one way to take that toll road around Austin. For trucks, it's $24. But earlier this year, because Cintra had paid them $100 million for raising the speed limit to 85, TxDOT turned around and spent that same money to benefit Cintra. They used that money to buy down the truck toll rate for a year so that they would pay the auto rate and get more trucks to take that road. And of course, once that $100 million disappears, what are they going to do next year when that money's gone and the truck price goes right back up and trucks still can't afford to take it? So the whole thing's crazy. They're manipulating all kinds of things for these private operators. Well, in the Metroplex, the toll rates on the LBJ when that project is finished, it's the same company, Spain-based company called Cintra. will be 75 cents a mile to take that road in peak hours. That is ridiculously high amounts of money, and that's a lot higher than an NTTA publicly money toll road. So essentially we're giving these corporations the power to tax. Another dangerous thing about these P3s is that they socialize the losses and privatize the profits. Sounds an awful lot like TARP. Remember that? I mean, they set it up essentially the same way. They monetize the debt, and they make it so that we have to bail out the private operator if the toll road goes south. The other problem you've seen a lot of lately in tolls, with toll billing, is that the due process for contesting toll bills gets totally haywire when it's a private company involved. In Canada, which was one of the first toll operations for Sintra in North America, their ETR 407 up there, they literally signed away in this contract where if even people who never took the road, they've billed dead people for the road, people who've never even gotten on the road, if they get a bill from Sintra that says they owe a certain amount of money, the state literally cannot step in and adjudicate that case or be a third party and give them their due process rights. They literally have to pay what Sintra says they owe, or they can lose their driver's license. What? That's right. So a lot of times due process goes out the window with this stuff, and we'll have to see how, because each contract's a little bit different. But I'm sure you've heard that the state legislature passed a bill this time that even the NTTA now can block your car registration for failure to pay a debt. So that violates a whole bunch of not only civil rights but our constitutional rights in trying to make us have to, in essence, they could take you to court and eventually they could potentially put you in jail for failure to pay a debt, which is like a debtor's prison, which we've outlawed a long time ago. So anyway, huge problem with the toll billing. That's right, it does. And it also puts the taxpayer on the hook to guarantee that that private operator gets paid out. There's been 2 deals where our state highway money, our gas tax money, is being put on the hook for a loan guarantee for one of these toll road projects. It was the first one was on Highway 161, and the second one was just recently on the Grant Parkway around Houston. So that every Texas taxpayer could have to pay, between the 2 projects, it will exceed $10 billion of our gas tax money will be potentially on the hook if the toll traffic doesn't show up for those 2 toll projects. The other catch is that these use massive amounts of public money. There's a reason why it says public-private partnership. It's not a truly private road and it's not a public road. It's a hybrid of the 2. That's why they want to come after the public money, so at the end of the day, we will have to bail out if that road fails. Traditional turnpikes, like the George Bush Turnpike, for instance, those were done with revenue bonds. That means if the toll traffic doesn't show up for that road, it's the toll revenue bond investors that take the hit for that. There's not any taxpayer money they can come after to bail out that road if it fails. So that's more the well-conceived toll project. But these new hybrids, and even some of the NTTA projects now, they are trying to seek public money to either guarantee the loan or in this case completely subsidize the construction of the project. On just the LBJ alone, there was $500 million of our gas tax money that went into that project, but you will have to pay 75 cents a mile to drive on it. Huge double taxation. If you count the North Tarrant Express, which is the work that's being done over in Tarrant County on Interstate 820, which is another Central project, that's going to eventually involve 4 different road segments, all they're basically a no-bid contract. They got the original award, and now they get right of first refusal on 4 other segments of highway without going to bid. The whole thing's crony capitalism on steroids. But between those 2 projects, $2 billion in public money, when you count the federal loans and the state money, went into those projects. All right, so we talked about the manipulation of the speed limits. Recently, you might have heard this, that the State Highway 130 has now been given junk bond status. Moody's just downgraded the road and their bond debt to junk bond status because they are 55% below what they anticipated the traffic level would be. And so we announced a boycott the day that that road opened. And so we kind of try to take a little bit of the credit. Who knows how much credit we can take. But at the end of the day, we're we're going to take the credit that if this thing goes belly up, that it's because Texans didn't want anything to do with this foreign toll road concept. And they expect default sometime in 2014, probably mid-year next year, that they will start defaulting on their debt. They've already dipped into reserves for their last 2 payments, and they don't think that they'll have enough money without either refinancing their debt or some other restructuring in order for them to make their payment in June. TxDOT could terminate that contract, but I believe it includes taxpayer bailouts or some kind of payment. They call it a payment for termination for convenience, they call it, that will require some taxpayer money to buy that back. So we don't want to buy back the road or terminate it and use taxpayer money. We'd rather see it go into default so we can get it back potentially for pennies on the dollar if it goes bankrupt. The other thing that was interesting, we have a transportation commissioner. I don't know if you all know this. The Transportation Commission in Texas is run by 5 appointees of the governor, okay? Then they also have a day-to-day executive director. So a lot of names get floated around and people get kind of confused because Phil Wilson's the executive director that runs kind of the day-to-day operations. But he answers to the Transportation Commission. Well, the Transportation Commission chairman is Ted Houghton. He actually announced the day that they were pulling the plug on the Trans-Texas Corridor 35 project that he's the most arrogant commissioner of the most arrogant state agency in the history of the state of Texas. That's Ted Houghton. He was up here recently, just 2 weeks ago here in the DFW area. There was a Texas Tribune hosted transportation symposium. I don't know if you heard about that in the Dallas Morning News or in the papers covered it. But he flat out lied to the people of Texas when he said there was no public money involved in the State Highway 130 project. Flatly not true. If you go right to the Federal Highway Administration website, their innovative project delivery section on SH 130 segments 5 and 6, it lists right there $430 million federal TIF loan that is 100% backed by the U.S. taxpayer. So if that project goes in default, ultimately we're on the hook to repay the federal government $430 million loan plus interest that we don't have money to pay back. This is why the public-private model is a failure when it comes to not only road projects, but any kind of infrastructure they use these P3s on, because there's always public money in the deal. Always. There's a way to bail out the private operator if the traffic doesn't show up. So it's a bad deal. Now, how many of you heard on Halloween at their commission hearing, the news didn't really reach the press until about a week later, so it's been out there for the week of the constitutional amendment election, last week basically, that now TxDOT, as yet another way of trying to bail out this failing toll road, is they want to swap I-35 in Austin with SH 130, in essence to make I-35 now the toll road and make State Highway 130 the free road. That is literally how desperate we are, scraping the bottom of the barrel on road policy, where we're literally going to take the primary artery of commerce in our state and convert it into a toll road to bail out one bad decision. We're now making 3 and 4 bad decisions down the road to bail out the first bad decision. Not a good deal for the people of Texas. Now, this last legislative session, by the way, in 2007 we got a moratorium on P3s in place in our state. They expired as a blanket policy in September of 2009. But in the 2011 and session this year, they've been passing a bill that still allows a handful of projects to continue. So this year they've added even more. So now we're up to 23 different roads or bridges that will be up on the auction block with these private entities operating the roads, taking over our public infrastructure. And they're significant. These are pretty significant portions, and they hit every area of the state. And before long, they'll be able to piece this thing together, and they'll really start to lock down travel in our state over time, and we will have lost control of our public infrastructure. But these are the ones right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We've got Loop 9. How many of you have heard that the Trans-Texas Corridor is dead? Deader than a doornail. You've heard this, right? They've said it for a number of years now. Guess what? Loop 9 is part of the original Trans-Texas Corridor 35 project. State Highway 130 was the first one to get built. So they're just going to piece it together segment by segment. In fact, the former executive TxDOT director, Amadeo Saenz, actually admitted it in a hearing up here in Rockwall County, that they're just calling it something else and they're going to build it piece by piece instead. Now, thankfully, the part we did kill is it's not going to be 1,200 feet wide. So there's not going to be the same level of land grab that they would have done, but they're still going to be selling off their infrastructure to these private companies, and we're going to lose control and state sovereignty over our public infrastructure through it.
I-35 east from 635 to 380 in Dallas and Denton counties. I-35 west from I-30 to State Highway 114 in Tarrant. Highway 183 from 121 to I-35 east. The Southern Gateway Project, which is I-35 east from 8th Street to I-20. And then Highway 67 from I-35 east to FM 1382, which is Beltline Road. Then the North Turn Express involves Interstate 820 from 183 to Randall Mill Road. Then you've got State Highway 114 as well as Loop 12. Parts of Loop 12 will all be up on the auction block potentially for one of these public-private partnerships. It is a fact that they cost taxpayers more money. And Dennis Enright, who is an expert in P3s with Northwest Financial out of New Jersey, even admitted down here that P3s cost 50% more than a publicly run toll project. I'm not a fan of any toll roads, including public toll roads, but when we're paying 50% more than even the publicly run toll roads, we're in big trouble. And then State Senator Robert Nichols was quoted in the Express News back in 2007 when we were putting the moratorium in place on these things. He was saying that they're designed to extract exorbitant toll rates. Well, of course, wouldn't you as a public official, most public officials, love these things because they get to outsource the tax increase to a private entity that the people have no control over. I mean, what are we going to do really? Go to a board of directors in Spain to say, oh, you can't increase that toll rate, it's too high. We can't exert any pressure on a private corporation. And they take the taxation out of the hands of we the people when they do this. So the elected official gets to say they didn't vote for tax hikes because they don't want to raise the gas tax. But look what they're doing out on the other side of their mouth. I mean, they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. They're trying to have it both ways. Here's what they did in the 83rd legislature. They continued this tax and toll tsunami. Goodness gracious, this tax and toll tsunami. Senate Bill 1112. You notice Robert Nichols' name is on a lot of these bills. He's now the Senate Transportation Committee chairman, and he knows better. He's also a former transportation commissioner. He actually ran the commission during some of these key years when some of this was going on. And now he authors a lot of this really bad legislation. He knows how bad they are. You saw his quote. But he's authoring the bills to continue these projects. And that's what kills you about some of these guys. John Corona up here in Dallas-Fort Worth, the same thing. He knows better. He's been an open critic of these, yet votes for them every session. So we have to hold them accountable for that voting record. We're tired of them telling us one thing we want to hear in a group like this, but then going to Austin and putting the nail in the coffin on taxpayers. This is not right. So anyway, on that, they can actually now access property tax and sales tax to subsidize toll roads. So you're going to, again, build the road tax money and then be charged again to drive on it. They're called transportation reinvestment zones. If you ever hear a word of it being breathed at your county commissioner's court, get in there like you've never seen and get everyone in there for public comment, and you try and get to those public hearings that they will have on the TRZs, Transportation Reinvestment Zone, and tell them no way, because it involves your property tax bill going up for your lifetime to pay for these transportation projects. And this is another unfunded mandate. This is how the state, who is failing to properly fund roads with our existing tax money that we already collect, and they're shoving it down at the local level, and they're just not fixing our roads, so the locals get so tired of waiting for the state to do their job that they'll do all kinds of monkey business, like establishing a transportation reinvestment zone and using your property tax and your local taxes that are supposed to go to serve your county roads, are now going to be siphoned off for a state highway project, which means eventually your county taxes are going to have to go up to make up the difference that's now going to the state road. This is not truth in taxation. Then, SB 1792, Paxton was an author on this. This is the toll collection bill. This is the one that allows them to block your car registration for failure to pay a debt. SB 1730, also Nichols, and then Larry Phillips. He's in the Sherman-Denison area. If you know some people up in that area, he has got to go. Okay? Phillips has also got his name on a bunch of these bills. Terrible, terrible, terrible. That was the bill that allows all these P3s. It's actually 23. It's 21 roads, but when you count the bridges, it's 23 projects that are on the auction block for these privatized toll projects. Then SB 1029, again, you see Paxton and Phillips, and even my own senator, Donna Campbell, who ran as an anti-toll Tea Party candidate, completely betrayed us this session and voted for all this stuff. And she authored this bill. We've been working on this piece of the transportation code now for 4 sessions, trying to get the loopholes out of the law that allow them to convert existing free lanes into toll lanes. The way they can get around it in some of the language, and we're going to look at it in a minute, is they basically try and say that they can come in and toll the main lanes of your road, like take away all of I-35, and leave your frontage road as your non-toll option, because the way the statute reads, it says if you leave as many non-toll lanes when you're done as are there when you start. It doesn't qualify it that it has to be an express lane. They're downgrading your road with the language that's in this loophole. Well, we originally filed the bill as a completely clean bill that just says you cannot operate a non-toll segment of state highway as a toll segment, period. Okay, it was a clean bill. She let the highway department and all of the various minions, the lobbyists, and everybody who want this to come and talk her into putting 5 of the loopholes back in the law. In fact, the only loopholes they took out was our right to a public vote. Yeah, they actually made the statute worse. Then, these 3 bills down here, actually 4 bills, were fee hikes. So all these guys that say they didn't vote to raise your taxes, how many of you think a vehicle registration fee is still a tax? Yeah. See, yes, we're Republicans, right? We call fees taxes, we know better. Well, they all voted for these, even though these were all related to specific regions of the state. Didn't apply to Dallas-Fort Worth this time, but several of them were for the Valley, and one was for San Antonio. And the San Antonio bill was the worst one. Again, Donna Campbell, who's supposed to be a Tea Party, anti-tax pledge, the whole thing, voted for a bill for a $10 vehicle registration fee hike on Bexar County residents, and deliberately changed the legislation so that it would directly go to the toll authority. And now the toll authority is going to be able to use tax money, vehicle registration fees, to build their toll roads with. They couldn't build them otherwise. See, I've been working all this time to defund them. If you can dry up their funding sources, you can kill a lot of these toll projects, right? I mean, I'm just trying to find another way to do this because it's so hard to get the toll legislation changed. So we were trying to dry up their funding so that they would eventually fold and go because there's no toll roads in San Antonio still. We're trying really hard, okay? Well, she goes and makes it so that they now have a permanent revenue stream to keep their doors open forever. And that was the one bill that did not go to a public vote before it happened. That's how bad this is getting, folks. I mean, this is someone who we thought we could trust. All the good anti-toll bills, like the toll cessation bill, that's my favorite one. It's a bill that we filed now for 2 sessions that would take the toll off the road when it's paid for. Do I hear an amen? Yeah. We wanted to cease all of these toll, the toll being charged in perpetuity. That bill went nowhere. It got a hearing in committee, but that was it. Went nowhere. Along with all of our other bills, like ending the gas tax diversions. All those went nowhere. All but one of the good property rights bills died, and the one that did pass was pretty lame. It wasn't a very good bill as far as protection for property rights. Because as you can tell, we have to really, really watch property rights now as it pertains to transportation, because now there's a lot of eminent domain abuse being involved in this stuff, because there's personal, private profits involved. Okay, there's going to be a transportation amendment election next year. And this whole thing was such a shady deal to begin with. It was supposed to appear on the ballot a week ago. But there was so much angst and worry about that Prop 6 water one passing that they thought if they had a rainy day rate for water and transportation all on the same ballot, that one of them would fail or maybe both would fail. And they couldn't have that. So they purposely kicked the transportation amendment to next year when there's no normal election happening. Well, I guess we'll have our general election, right? Yeah. Okay, so it's going to be a high turnout for this one, thankfully. But at the end of the day, they always gripe and moan and whine about how, oh, Terry, you always want us to have elected representatives on these toll authorities and blah, blah, blah. And they always opine and gripe at me about how, do you understand how much it costs to hold an election? Well, now look what they're doing, right? They're going to hold a special election just for this crazy thing. Okay, so it took 3 special sessions of the legislature to even get agreement on this. This is how bad it is with road policy in our state. But ultimately, what this is designed to do is take half of the oil and gas severance tax, which normally goes to capitalize the rainy day fund, which is our emergency fund, and divert it to roads. Now, there are some protections that Joanne and I worked really hard to get into the bill so that if it does pass, we have some protections in place. So here, the first one is, the Legislative Budget Board is going to recommend, and the legislature has to approve it next session in 2015, a minimum amount in the rainy day fund so that it is protected. In other words, they won't be able to drain the rainy day fund dry. A certain amount always has to be in there. Let's just say it's $4 billion. So let's just say they always have to have $4 billion before any money can go to roads. Okay, so there's going to be what they call a floor. A minimum amount has to stay in there. The other thing that we got in there, thankfully, is that it can only go to non-toll projects. It cannot go to subsidizing these toll roads. So that's a good thing. Now, some estimates were as high as $1.2 billion a year is what they estimate this would generate, but now I'm seeing more like $700 million a year. Now they're kind of downgrading how much money they think it's going to actually generate. But still, at the end of the day, TxDOT is underwater by about $4 billion a year. So even this is only going to fix 1/4 of the problem. They're $1 billion a year behind in maintenance and $3 billion a year behind in new construction. And the worst thing that they stuck into this at the very end of the bill is something that Tommy Williams wanted over in Houston, because he's in the area where they, of course, have the Gulf of Mexico. They now have a new diversion added into this bill that will take some of this money, or excuse me, that will allow some public money, basically property taxes. It's going to be one of these transportation reinvestment zones, will now be allowed to fund port infrastructure with that. So it's money that should be going to, anyways, it's road money is now going to be going, it's the Texas Mobility Fund actually, instead of property tax, excuse me. But anyway, the Texas Mobility Fund money can now be diverted to port projects when it's supposed to be funding roads. So they added yet another diversion of our road money. So when they keep telling you there's no money for roads, keep going at them with all these diversions that they keep creating every session. Now here's what tolling existing roads looks like. Doesn't this look like a great thing you're going to have on that DFW I-635 and the North Turn Express? This is what happens when you put toll lanes down the middle of an existing road. Who's getting congestion relief? Only the people on the toll road, right? And notice how all the trucks are sitting off over here. This is SR 91 in Southern California. And by the way, the state had to buy it back in about 3 years' time because the roads, the free roads, their non-compete agreement, they couldn't even maintain the free roads surrounding the toll road. So you can imagine the kind of dangerous pothole navigation and things that were going on, and they actually had to buy it back. And they ended up getting it back for 3 times the price and then if the public entity had just built it themselves. And that was also originally a P3 with Zachary and a French company, by the way. So these folks pay $9.50 to go 10 miles on those managed toll lanes. They call them, I'm sure you've heard this buzz term by now because they've said it a lot in the press now. Managed lane equals toll lane. They use this code language to not say the T word. Okay? It's a tax. They know that people don't like tolls, and they don't want people to be tipped off in enough time to stop a road project. So they don't really drop the bomb on you until the facility opens and they start charging you. And so it's all done by design. And they'll say, oh, a managed lane isn't necessarily a toll lane because they have this little definition that they use, and it could be other things that they manipulate traffic with. But at the end of the day, think of it as government control of your morning commute. That's really what this is. So that's what the tolling existing roads looks like. Now, how much is it going to cost us? Now, even if the toll rates are quote, quote, reasonable, which are still a lot of money to me, they average about 25 cents a mile on a publicly operated project now. So that's like adding $5 to every gallon of gas you buy. Now, if it's one of these privately run projects, which is 75 cents a mile, which is what the central operated LBJ and Interstate 820 will be when they open, 75 cents a mile would be like adding $15 to every gallon of gas you buy. That's how much punitive levels of taxation we are talking about here. It's pennies a day versus dollars a day. When you look at that would be $19.50 a day if you took the full project area on LBJ. $19.50 a day. $5 grand a year in new taxes. That's like doubling some people's property tax and just adding to your morning commute. So it's pennies a day versus dollars a day. What it averages for a gas tax funded road is about 1 to 2 cents a mile depending on the fuel efficiency of your vehicle. They passed a bill in 2011 that allows the tolls to stay in place in perpetuity. So instead of passing our toll cessation bill, they passed this instead, which this directly is in conflict with the Constitution, which prohibits perpetuities. It prohibits monopolies and perpetuities. And we're granting both with these P3s. So it's a really, really bad deal. It was HB 1112, again, you see Phillips and Nichols' names on it. It greatly expands the authority of these regional mobility authorities and makes it so that they can never take the toll off the road. They call it system financing. Again, they use all this gobbledygook bureaucrat speak to kind of hide what they're really doing. But ultimately, what they can do is they can obligate the toll revenues from one corridor to go borrow money to do another toll road somewhere else. They're leveraging the toll revenue from one to get financing for another. So they can never take the toll off the first road because they've obligated that money to a different road, and so on and so on and so on. So they call it multi-leveraging. And at the end of the day, the toll can never come off the road because of that. And that prohibits, that's violated the Constitution, Article 1, Section 26. And SB 19, in conjunction with this bill, this one actually applies to the North Texas Tollway Authority and all the different versions of toll authorities, because since RMAs are in a different chapter of the code, this SB 19 applies to all of them, and it gives the NTTA ownership of these state highways in perpetuity. Now, why would a toll authority want to seek ownership of a state highway in perpetuity if it's not to keep the toll in place in perpetuity? So that's when you say, okay, they can't do that, how can this happen, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's because they've systematically, session after session, changed the law to make it, quote, quote, legal. Now, we will hopefully someday be able to pull together a constitutional challenge to that. But what I'm understanding from lawyers is we have to wait until the toll's in place and beyond the road's paid for you to actually sue them on it. So it could be another 30 years before we can actually sue them to stop that. So here's the fight over tolls on existing roads. Campbell and Paxton were key players in this. We would have eliminated all the loopholes. They added 5 of them back in. It gives TxDOT literally a blank check to virtually toll any road in Texas. Here's what the bill says. Except as provided by X, the department may not operate a non-toll state highway or segment of a state highway as a toll project. And it just goes on and says, except. So it ends that little thing that says it can operate as a toll project. And then it says, unless the commission by order designated the highway or segment of toll project before the contractor to construct the highway is awarded. That means any project that's currently in the MPO plans, up here they call it the RTC, and they have a 4-year and a 25-year plan. Virtually every project in the Metroplex is labeled a toll road right now today. As long as they designated a toll project before they go to contract, which of course the contract only happens 30 days before they go to move dirt, anything can be converted to a toll road under that language. As long as they do it. In other words, the only thing that loophole stops is if they've already got something under construction and they try to turn it into a toll road after it's already under construction. But everything else, they can toll, as long as they do it before they go to construction. The second loophole is the project was designated as a toll project in the plan or program of an MPO, that's what the Metropolitan Plan Organization is, on or before September 1st of 2005. At least 70% of all the toll projects around the state were in an MPO plan prior to 2005 because they have 25-year plans in place by federal law. Third, this is the part where they really try and do the monkey business with the free roads and the frontage roads. A facility is constructed adjacent to the highway or segment so that the number of non-toll lanes on the converted highway and the adjacent facility together is greater than or equal to the number in existence on the converted highway or segment before the conversion. This adjacent facility together means frontage road. So if you have 6 free lanes on I-35 today, they can convert all those to toll lanes and leave you 6 frontage roads because the 2 of them together will now equal the same number of non-toll lanes as before they tolled the road. So anyway, you get the idea that there's a lot of loopholes in this thing. And they of course make exceptions for HOV lanes. We wanted it to be completely clean. There's no way any Texan should have their freeways converted to toll roads and be double taxed this way. And yet here we are still dealing with it. And a precedent's already been set. They've already done it on parts of Highway 45 Southeast and Mopac in Austin as well as 290. They've done it on the I-10. How many of you have been to Houston and seen the very first managed lane project in Texas opened on the I-10 Katy Freeway? Have y'all been down there at all recently? It opened maybe 2 or 3 years ago at the most. That project was 100% funded with our gas tax money. Not one Texan should be paying a toll to use that lane. It's completely paid for. They're doing it just simply for taxation, just graft, runaway taxation in the hands of these people. And of course, my Highway 281 in San Antonio, they're still trying to convert it. Now, Mopac in Austin, I just wanted to give you this quick example. They are using $230 million in our gas tax dollars to build toll lanes in the middle of MoPac. This is through one of the central main corridors in the Austin area, okay? The bid came back, so it's bad enough that they're gonna double tax you. I mean, the people there are just as bad as we all are. We've tried to stop it all these years. They're still gonna do it anyway. It was gonna be one of those public-private partnerships. At least it's gonna be a publicly run toll project, but they're still gonna use our tax money for it. In other words, no one should have to pay a toll to drive on this road. It's paid for. Totally paid for. The estimates came in for construction, came in $20 million under budget. Instead of get that money back so that they could go put it toward another road, they're going to squander the money on enhancements. You know, like, I don't know, medallions on the highway or color cement or something. And the other thing they're doing on this project is they're shrinking the width of the free lanes. Now, you all know full well what happens when they shrunk the width of your lanes during the construction phase of LBJ. What's the first thing you have to do? Slow down. You have to lower those speed limits because you can't drive as fast. Because now you're dealing with a lane that's probably, they usually take them from 12 foot, which is standard, down to 10 feet. Okay? So now you've got like no leeway. If you so much as, pick up, you could, hit the car next to you. And some of these big rigs with their big wide mirrors can literally clip another car because the lanes are that close together. They're making it less safe on purpose to try and force people. In order to drive a regular speed, you're going to have to get in those toll lanes. And we found out from some former TxDOT engineer that there are 9 design exceptions in this road that will cause fatalities. Not if, it is when. There will be fatalities because of the way that they're designing this road simply to force traffic onto that tollway, and they're designing it in a way that's unsafe for people to get onto and off of that road. Now this is something you may not remember, but it was in your newspaper in 2009, the Dallas Morning News. Even the toll authorities are getting panicked that there's going to be too many toll roads in the Metroplex, which there really will be. I don't know if you guys know that at one point there were 400 miles of toll roads planned for the Metroplex. 400 miles. People are going to realize that every new road in the Metroplex is going to be a toll road, said the NTTA at the time vice chairman. He was the chairman, now he's the transportation commissioner. Do you see how these guys just kind of revolving door? They always just end up in the same positions. And he said, even our free roads will soon have a toll component on them. Another thing he said is that all but the Dallas North Tollway aren't working. That's code for they're unsustainable, they're not toll viable, and they're not bringing in enough revenue to even retire the debt. They know this is a bad deal. The people inside these deals will tell you if they're being honest with you. And yet they continue to promote it. What's that?
From Arlington?
I know it's from up here, but I don't know if it's Arlington specifically. But his family's been in this area for a long time. His father was a congressman, I believe. The Vandergrifts go way back. Then, they're going to change our HOV policies to benefit Centra. Some of you may remember last year, I think it was, they came and did some public hearings on the HOV policy. They want to change it from HOV +2 to use the lane for free to HOV +3. 3 people in your car to be able to use the lane for free. And why is that? Because they're going to convert all your HOV lanes into these toll managed lanes so that single occupancy vehicles can pay a toll to access the lane, or if you have 3 people in your car, you can still ride it for free. At the end of the day, you have to have a special status to be able to get access to these lanes. These were all built and paid for with our tax money. Everybody should be able to access those lanes. Do I hear another amen?
That's right.
Everybody should have access to those lanes. So what they came in and did is they wanted to change this. Well, thankfully we generated some good blowback. And like good Texans, they said, no way, you're not going to do this. So they backed off for now. But they said they may still change it in the future, so we watch it. But guess what we still have to do now? Because that contract they signed with Centra on the LBJ and the North Channel Express, which is Interstate 820, their contract says that only those that are HOV +3 can ride the lanes, not even free, but at a discount. You only get a discount if you have 3 people in your car. So that anyone, because they're going to have an interoperable system, in other words, if you're going to have HOV lanes that the public entities operate are going to flow into Centra's road seamlessly, okay? So if you're HOV +2 and you get on Centra's toll road when you only have 2 in your car, we, the Texas taxpayer, are going to reimburse Centra for the difference for all the HOV +2 that use their lane. That's their solution. What a great solution, huh? So what are we about? How can we fix this mess? What are we advocating in the legislature? Well, We feel that there are lots of pro-taxpayer solutions that, of course, they ignore. They don't want to listen to us because ours take fiscal discipline, right? They don't want to do that. But there are two great sources of revenue that will fix this $4 billion shortfall we have at TxDOT annually. The first is ending those gas tax diversions. It's $1 billion a year in non-education diversions, and it's close to that. And then the school diversions are about $750 million a year. Okay? So total, we have quite a bit of money just in gas tax diversions that will help fix the problem. But as you can tell, it's still only a small sliver of the problem. The real big potential is with the vehicle sales tax. Now, all of you know when you buy or sell a new or used vehicle, that purchase, you have to pay a 6.25% sales tax on that. Now, that's on our vehicle. How many of you think that all taxes charged on our vehicles should be going to fund roads? Right? Yeah. Okay? These are the road users, right? So anything that's involving our cars legitimately could go to fund roads. I mean, that's taxation tied closest to the people using that facility. Well, that money is going to general revenue. It's not going to roads. And what are the two main things that are funded out of the general revenue? Education and health and human services, or Medicaid. That's where our road dollars are going. $3 billion a year. In fact, the comptroller, the most recent numbers we have is $3.3 billion. And our road money is going to fund these other things. And yet they sit there and tell us with a straight face there's no money for roads. So, by far, based upon careful study, a gas tax funded road is the most fiscally conservative way to build our roads. This said by Senator Corona, who has subsequently voted and authored almost all these pro-toll bills himself when he was the chairman of the committee. So, we feel like they're setting us up for another bailout. They're in fact literally, the financing of these toll roads is being structured the exact same way as the subprime mortgage industry did. And we all know what happened with that. We ended up with TARP and this massive trillion-dollar, what was it, $1.7 trillion or whatever it was, bailout of TARP. And so the toll roads were promised to end our revenue shortfalls. It was going to fix all of our road funding problems because these private entities were going to come bring all this money to the table. Well, as I showed you on that one slide, and I have another whole worksheet on it in the back, I detail for you how every one of the public-private partnerships has been funded. Every one of them involves public money. So in every case, the private operator did not bring more than 25% of the money to the table. I think we can come up with that 25% of the money to keep those roads in the public's hands, right? So it's not fixed either problem. All we have is a bunch of underutilized toll roads, great roads that nobody can use, and it's not solving our congestion problem. We're now $31 billion in debt. We're even opening roads that are completely paid for, like that 45 Southeast project in Austin, 100% paid for. They actually said it in the paper that the reason why they're still charging tolls to use that road is to cover the sea of red ink and the debt they can't cover on the other toll roads in Austin. So this is all going to hit you. Whether you ever take the road or not, we are all paying to bail out these failing toll roads. In Austin, we've already bailed out their toll system to the tune of $100 million of gas tax money. And taxpayers are being set up for this too big to fail syndrome. They've spread it so far and so wide that when one of these projects fails, it's going to end up crumbling all these others because they're all propped up and connected together. So what do we want? We want sustainable road policy. We want to stop building roads with debt, right? That's the first thing. We want to end diversions completely and get back to pay-as-you-go, because before Rick Perry, we did pay-as-you-go, zero debt. We need to get back to that model. We want no unelected board to have taxing authority, which TxDOT has now become a de facto taxing entity by being able to do all of this toll roads. Not to mention, all the toll authority boards around the state are unelected. None of them answer to we the people, and yet they can tax us dearly. We also want them to stop using taxpayer money to subsidize these projects. If you're going to build a toll road, they shouldn't be using any public money. Only the user of that road should be paying for that road, period. Right? Right. That's good policy. Then the last thing is the end non-traditional financing. We don't want any more of these public-private partnerships. All it means is public money for private profits, and that's not a good deal for taxpayers. So I encourage you to take action. We're going to do a Q&A here too, but I'll leave this slide up. Please go to our website. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. We would love you to like our turf page. Before we started our Facebook page way back before they had organizational pages where you can do the liking. So we don't have that many likes on the turf page. I have a ton of friends on Facebook for this movement, and not all of them have remembered to come over and like the Facebook page for turf, so please do. There's a link right from our website. You can do it that way, or you can find us at facebook.com/texasturf.org and like our page there. Also, we have a legislative report card linked up on our website. If you want to know how your elected official got graded on this, we took, I think it was 5 pieces of legislation. We took the voting records of those, assigned a certain number value to it, and whoever voted one way or the other, we churned out their grade strictly based on a mathematical calculation. It wasn't like we decided, oh, you get an F and you get an A. You know, it wasn't like that. So, and we kind of tell you the methodology at the end of it. If you scroll all the way down to the end, you'll know what bills we used. Because your legislators, when you go tell them, you got an F on the turf report card, this has already happened, so that's what I'm telling you. And they say, what? I didn't know. I didn't know what was in that bill. Oh. Well, every one of them, by the way, we don't just use these random bills and come to a gotcha on them later. Every single one of them was put on notice prior to them getting taking a vote. Not just once, but multiple times. And many of the times it was from me personally telling them what was in the bill. So they either get it by email, and or we also drop it off to their staffers directly in their office and hand it to their transportation the staffers. They get multiple notices, trust me. Not to mention we did a lot of robocalls too. Also, we encourage you to see Truth Be Told, the movie. We've actually had a professional filmmaker. His name is Bill Molina. He's done things for the History Channel, for the Discovery Channel. He's done Hollywood features. He's been nominated for Emmys. He's a wonderful cinematographer. The Truth Be Told documentaries have actually won awards at the Houston Film Festival multiple times. So they're very well done. And he puts up most of the footage on YouTube. I know it's annoying you have to kind of watch them in 10-minute segments, but at least it's available for you to watch it that way. And we encourage you to do that so you know what on earth is going on. Because me telling you this, it'll get you mad. Wait till you watch the arrogance of your elected representatives and what they say in public meetings. It would blow your mind how arrogant they are. So a lot of people, you know, visual is the new medium, right? Media. So that's another way for us to educate people. And contact your lawmakers. Please, please, please make this an issue in the races, including the governor's race. We're trying to elevate transportation because really this is like a sleeper issue. Short of the Trans-Texas Corridor, most of this stuff, people have no clue how bad it is and what's really going on and how much their level of taxation is about to go up. And it's all going to be out of our hands. We won't be able to control any of it. Once those facilities open and all that debt is incurred, it has to be repaid somehow. And they're going to either do it with tax money or toll money. Either way, we're going to be paying dearly to pay back all this debt. And people need to be aware of that so that they can make it an issue. Make sure that the people that we elect are going to do what they say they're going to do. And that's why we're not going to support Donna Campbell this time around for re-election. Because when somebody betrays you that fast and that badly, they need to go. They obviously aren't really the true blue people that are a person of their word if they do that to us. And this way you can tell them, no more tolls, no more debt, and don't sell off our Texas roads to these private companies. And we want them and expect them to end diversions completely. How many of you remember the governor, Dewhurst, and the speaker, all on the opening day of the session in 2013 this year in January, all three promised to make road funding a priority, and all three promised to end diversions. Do you remember hearing that?
Yeah.
Didn't happen. All three promised it, and it never happened. In fact, the governor wanted to issue more debt. Do you want to know what his new harebrained idea was? To issue century bonds. 100-year debt. That was Rick Perry's answer to our road funding problem. This is what's ridiculous, you guys. They're going to blame this on us. They're going to say, oh, it's those Republicans, those Tea Parties, those right-wingers. They're so afraid to raise the tax that now look at them. They're forced to issue all this debt because they can't raise the taxes that are needed for these road projects. And I would kind of give them a little inch on that if we didn't have the diversions. If we were literally using every dime of our road money for roads and not diverting it elsewhere, and knowing that it's a fixed amount that doesn't go up with inflation, we might cut them some slack, right? We would say, okay, it's reasonable. If we need to keep our gas tax at least pace with inflation, we'll let them do it. But that's not what's going on. They just keep spending all the money. They had an $8 billion surplus, and they still want us to raise half of the rainy day money to fund roads when they had an $8 billion surplus and $4 billion in combined diversions between the gas tax and the vehicle sales tax that they have not fixed, and still come crying to us that there's not enough money for roads. So I don't know about you, but that's just unacceptable.